Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jesse Torres. I'm your state small business advocate here with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Pleased to be able to open today's webinar titled Protect Your Business from Disasters. This webinar is being hosted by the Office of Small Business Advocate, which is a unit within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GO-Biz. I can tell you in a previous life, I was the regional director for the Los Angeles Small Business Development Center Network and was part of the California SBDC network, where issues around business continuity, disaster preparedness, we're definitely on the forefront. In fact, we were able to work with the Seismic Commission on producing really one of the first studies in a long time about how businesses need to get prepared in the event of disaster. So today's webinar, is definitely something that I'm very much interested in learning more about and seeing what we can do to help support small businesses when it comes to catastrophes and how to prepare them for such catastrophes. Today's webinar features two officials from the state and federal governments. Abby Browning, Chief of the Office of Private Sector Non-Governmental Organization Coordination at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, will be presenting, along with Sushil Kumar, Public Information Officer at the U.S. Small Business Administration. Abby and Sushil work with business owners throughout the state on disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And before I turn this webinar over to them to get started, I'm going to have my colleague Janelle Green, who's our small business specialist here at GO-Biz, who's going to introduce some of the features of the GoToWebinar, the platform we're using today.
Thank you, Jesse. At the far right of your screen, you should see a vertical toolbar. This toolbar will provide you with access to the audio and visual for the presentation. If you experience any technical issues related to audio during the presentation, please click on Help at the top of the toolbar and select Sound Check. This will allow you to check your audio configuration. Participant lines will remain muted during the entire presentation. If you have a question during the webinar, please submit it during the presentation via the Questions chat box. The Questions chat box is located in the middle of the toolbar. GO-Biz staff will monitor that box and respond during the Q&A session, which will be held at the end of the presentation. Also, at the top left of the toolbar, you'll see two icons. The blue icon with the white box allows you to view the presentation in full screen mode. The blue icon with a picture of a hand allows you to raise your hand to ask questions. This feature will not be used since questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar via the questions chat box. I will now turn the presentation over to our presenters. Abby will begin with her presentation. Abby and Sushil, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Janelle. As was said, my name is Abby Browning, and I'm with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. I'm the Chief of the Private Sector NGO Coordination. That basically means that I am the liaison for all businesses, all business associations, universities, philanthropic groups, community organizations, and faith-based groups coming into the Office of Emergency Services. It encompasses all areas of emergencies. So it's fire departments, law departments, but also Homeland Security. So we cover natural disasters, but as well as man-made disasters. To start off, I wanted to explain a little bit about our process, how things work in the state of California. This is how we're supposed to work across the country. California developed this system, and so it is strongest in our state. All disasters are local, they start local, and they end local. So what happens is there's a disaster in the field, we have our on-site responders. That would be your local fire department, your local police department. Then the local county or city or special district steps in to help fill the gap as far as if more is needed, if it's a larger disaster. If it's too large, if it exceeds the resources of the local county, we go to the operational area. If that is exceeded, then we go to the regional. We have 3 regions in California. We have our coastal region, we have our southern region, and we have our inland region. And if that operation is exceeded, we then go to the statewide level. And we have a state operations center here in Sacramento that helps gather information, distribute information, and coordinate resources. On the event where it exceeds the state resources, that is when we request from the President a federal declaration, and then FEMA is sent in to help us. So what last year, we had a perfect example of this during the fires that were the Valley Fire and the Butte Fire up in Northern California. What happened was the fire started growing and growing and growing, and eventually it became too big for even the state to handle, and we had to request a federal declaration, and that's where our friends from FEMA, but also SBA, who you'll hear from later, and other federal agencies came to help us with the response and the recovery. In OES, the way that we are divided, we have directorates. We have our operations directorate. Everyone that is in charge of response and recovery are in the operations directorate. We have our planning, preparedness, and training directorate. This includes all of our earthquake plans, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. This is preparedness, all of the materials that we develop, as well as webinars and workshops for. And then training and exercises are for our local responders to be trained and up to date. We have hazmat training, we have homeland security training, any kind of training you could think of that your first responders would need, we provide that for them. We have a logistics department, and that is basically for resources. The simple way to say it is they get the stuff, and they get the stuff where it needs to go. So if we need water in a certain area, we tell logistics we need water. They find the water, they move the water, and then they distribute the water. Finance and admin is another directorate because all of these things need to be paid for, and we need to keep a log of what's happening, when it's happening, and so we have people that are dedicated to that. And then finally, there's the executive level. My office is in the executive level because private sector NGO coordination goes over top of all of those other directorates. I'm involved in operations, I'm involved in planning and preparedness, I'm involved in logistics, and I'm involved in finance and admin. So I report directly to the director, and because of that, I'm able to float between the different areas. In my office, just so you have an understanding, the main tasks that I do are private sector NGO MOUs, those are memorandums of understanding, and those are our agreements with different businesses and different associations that help us with information flow. When we need to get information out to local businesses, small businesses, large businesses, the private sector in total, we can go to those partnerships and blast it out. We have, through our connections, we have well over 100,000 businesses ready to go whenever we need to. We also collect information from them. So if we find out that there's a shipment going to a Walmart and they need that one piece in order to reopen for that community, or there's this business that's the grocery store that happens to be the grocery store that serves this entire 10-block radius, and they need electricity just to open that grocery store so everyone can go back to work or go buy their food, they can come through my office, and then we can work with our authorities to get that done. We have a public-private task force. We recognize in the government that we do not know everything, and we aren't the best at everything. Businesses usually are much better at distribution, things like that, because it is your living. Therefore, we try to work with you and utilize your expertise. And so we develop these task force. We have the Business Utility Operations Center. That is stood up during a disaster, and that is, I am stationed inside the State Operations Center the entire time that it is activated, and I am the liaison for the businesses. And that goes down to the other liaison for the business world. After a disaster, I will go out into the community. I will talk to the local chambers of commerce. I will try to direct them to resources, things that they can help. And then finally, I'm also the liaison for the economic recovery. After a disaster happens, there's long-term recovery, and economics is something that is it's very tricky, and it takes time, and it takes patience in order to rebuild. And my job in my office is supposed to see that through, and that's something that we're working on for the fires from last year, is we're working on the economic injury that they suffered and trying to recover those communities. Okay. So when it comes to disaster preparedness for a small business, you need to ask yourself, how can you prepare? Well, obvious first thing is you have insurance. You can have fire insurance, you can have flood insurance, you can have earthquake insurance, depending on where you're located and what your threats are that come to your business. You'd also have some kind of idea of what could possibly happen to you. Those are some things that you need to think about. Is the first step as far as helping you on recovery. I know that my colleague Sushil will be talking more about that in depth. The next thing is disaster planning. So you sit down with your employees and you think about, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to do this? Well, what happens if there's an earthquake tomorrow and half of my employees lost their homes and can't come to work? What happens when there is a flood and no one can get into the office? You need to be thinking about those things and have plans in place so everybody's on the same path. There are several tools out there that can help you with that, and I know that like the SBDCs throughout the state have the ability to help you with this planning, and we can offer some other tools to help you figure out something to help with business continuity. It goes to the next thing, business continuity. You have to be prepared to suffer some setbacks. If that means having a remote location, having backup materials, like if you have all of your files and all of your accounting on a hard drive, have a backup of that at another location. Something like that. Business continuity is a very important thing, and from my experience, that is something that is heavily affected during a disaster. Businesses can get back up, start running again in a different building, in a different location, hire different employees, all those things. But if you don't have that continuity planning, you don't have your records, you don't have your files, you don't have a safety net, then you won't be able to continue. And then finally, there's safety measures. I mean, look around your business. Look around the location. Do you have, are your shelves in the appropriate way? Are your files attached to the wall? There's basic earthquake safety measures. There's basic flood measures that you take in your homes that most people forget to take in their business locations. So another question is, what should my business do during a disaster? So say the disaster is ongoing. Well, you make sure all your staff is accounted for. That's accountability is something that's very important to our office. I check in everywhere I go every day, and it's because anything can happen at any time, and especially during a disaster, you need to know where your employees are, and they need to know where you are. Think back to when you were in school and you did a fire drill, or you did an earthquake drill, or a bomb threat, and you had to go outside and your teacher had a note and counted how many of you got out of the building. You need to do that kind of thing for your business. You need to follow local instructions. If they tell you to evacuate, you need to evacuate. If they tell you to not go in this building because it could be a threat, then listen to them. Chances are they've already looked at it, and there's a valid reason that they're trying to help you out. And then set up remotely if necessary. That goes back to what I mentioned before about planning. If your business can be mobile, then set up in a different location. You can even set up in your garage or your family room, something like that, just to try to keep business moving. And then also make contact with the local authorities. Let them know that you're there. Let them know that your business is closed or is suffering, because it is all of our responsibility to get the community back running the way it was, if not the same, but better. And the first thing that we need to do is make sure the business is reopened. there another one? Yeah, okay. I wasn't impacted by the disaster. How can my business help? So, well, you can volunteer. If you want to volunteer to help clean up, you want to volunteer to shelters, you want to volunteer, we coordinate all of that on the local level, but it's also by an agency called the California Volunteers, and there's information on their website. It's basic calvolunteers.ca.gov, and we would love to have you volunteer. We just ask that you do not self-deploy. You just check in with someone and they tell you where you need to go. Donations, all donations are coordinated on the local level. We prefer financial donations because we could get 100 pillows and 5 bottles of water, and we would prefer to be able to assess the situation on the local level and decide what they are. But all donations are very appreciative. And then finally, once recovery has started, it's important to shop local. I know that that is a mantra that small business community often hears and often shouts to the rooftop, as they should. But it's very important for the businesses to get back to doing business in the area that was affected, because people can go to work and people can buy things. And once the sense of normalcy returns, recovery can happen quicker. Can we go back to that? No, the what resources are there to help my business recover? Yeah, okay. I apologize for this. I messed up the slide here. What resources are there to help my business recover from a disaster? Just so you know, FEMA comes in a disaster. FEMA will come in and they have individual assistance and public assistance that they can help with the disaster. SBA has loans, very, very good opportunities. U.S. Economic Development Authority Administration also has a level, and my colleague Sushil will talk more about that. On the state level, we have the Board of Equals as far as deadlines for your taxes, things like that. If something happens to your property and the value goes down, we can have it reassessed. There's many things that we can do, as well as the Treasurer's Office has programs that work with loaning institutions that we can work through, and then of course Business Consumer Services and Housing with all of the financing and the permits that they do. And then finally, throughout the year we have workshops, webinars, and individual help. And this is not just Cal OES, but this is all of the agencies, GO-Biz included, that has these different webinars or workshops to help you through this. This is not something you have to do alone. So there's Cal OES and GO-Biz, but also the Seismic Safety Commission. They have a great resource on disaster planning for small businesses that's on their website. We are having workshops throughout the state. The next one is going to be in Oakland on May the 18th about disaster planning. On the federal level, we have FEMA, we have Small Business Administration, U.S. Economic Development Administration, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And then we have our partners, such as the American Red Cross or the Small Business Development Centers, that are all willing to help, and whatever you need, you're not in this alone. And finally, I wanted to give my contact information. If you want more information about anything that I've said or want me to go into further detail, feel free to call me or email me. I'm happy to answer any questions or point you in the right direction. There are so many resources out there, and working through the government can be a nightmare. I realize this, and it's very bureaucratic. And so it's helpful for someone that is on the inside that will answer the phone, and I guarantee you I will answer the phone. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to all of you.
Thank you, Abby. We'll now turn it over to Sushil Kumar from the SBA.
Jesse, Janelle, Abby, thanks for having me on the conference call. a special thanks to all the attendees taking time out of their busy schedules to attend their webinar. It's a real pleasure to represent the Small Business Administration in the whole mindset of business preparedness and continuity. So I want to start off with first things first. Begin with the end in mind is something that I apply consistently. And Benjamin Franklin said it famously once. He said, failure to plan, prepare to fail. And that's what every business owner needs to start off with. The very lifeblood of any business is sales. People spend a lot of time and effort building up a business. And a lot of times, statistics show that people are too busy to have a continuity plan in place. And statistics also demonstrate that most Americans spend more time planning for a vacation than planning for a business continuity. And in some statistics that we'll start off with, okay? Janelle, if you could help me, I'm on the road, as you might know. The very first slide that we have talked about is 25% of businesses that close after disaster never open. And here is an even more startling statistic that states that if a business stays closed for the first 5 days of a disaster, there is a 90% probability that the business will not reopen after the first year. So those statistics are quite startling. And if there's one takeaway that in the next 15 minutes I would like for my audience to take away is, please have a business plan in place. And it'll be my responsibility to share with you in the form of slides what is it that a business needs to keep in mind when it plans for continuity in operations. So the next slide after that talks about facilities and operations. What if your business had to close down for several days after a disaster? The operative question, depending on your business and what is it that your scope of services might be, you need to have a plan internally and externally. Now, when I say internally, it really depends on the scope of services that your business offers and the number of employees that a business has. So let's start off with facilities and operations to reference the internal side of the business. Our recommendation from the Small Business Administration and many other business continuity experts is that we need to keep extra supplies of hard-to-replace items. The business needs to stay open because any given disaster, the mindset needs to be that we can't get back to normalcy for the first 2 weeks. Some even go as far as 30 days. So from cash to equipment to oil if you're a manufacturer to supplies if you happen to be a distributor, depends on your business. You need to identify what those items are that will keep your business afloat. Okay? Make the assumption also that the electricity grid won't be operable for the first 5 days. Many a suggestion has been made that generators need to be purchased. As a matter of fact, I'm currently deployed in Texas for the flooding, and more times than not, there were areas that didn't come back for at least a couple of days. Whether it was in the Beaumont area or the Harris County area where Houston is out of, or domiciled out of, I should say, electricity wasn't restored for a couple of days. And those couple of days, between food spoilages and valuable stuff where people have stored their information, were inaccessible. So having a backup generator is absolutely huge. Janelle, if you could take us to the next slide, which would be insurance. My colleague Abby referred very nicely to the word having insurance in place. One of the things that now I'm going to shift over to the operations side of the business, which is having a business continuity insurance. A lot of thought goes into having insurance for physical fixed assets, or physical damages are the ones that more people are most prone to think of, but having a business continuity insurance tends to be a little more expensive because the insurance company is actually taking the risk that the business owner is going to be shut down for a period of time, and depending on, I'm not an insurance expert, so I would suggest you contact an insurance agent and find out what is it that your business needs. They have the deluxe policies, they have the bare bones policies, which covers expenses for the time frame of 10 to 15 days, what have you, and that's a good piece of insurance to have for businesses. And on the small business loan side, briefly, what I will mention is that our disaster recovery loans tend to discount and or afford benefits after the insurance needs are met. So in other words, if there's a $100,000 loss to a business and the business continuity insurance covers $20,000, our disaster recovery needs program covers that $80,000 portion, because by law we're not allowed to cover duplicating benefits, if you will. So now if you would take us down to 2 slides down where it says most insurance policies don't cover flood damage. That's the need for the flood insurance. Whether you be a homeowner or a business owner, make sure your insurance is my summation statement for that particular slide. Now, back to the business continuity and be prepared for disaster. Protect your vital information. Whether it's an offsite backup or in the cloud, please make sure your vital records are saved. Tax records, social security numbers, birth certificates, anything that's important on a personal level as an employee or as a business owner, and or your records, your formation documents as a business, your corporate seal, your checks, all those things need to be put away in a place which is flood-proof and or saved, stored in the cloud. More times than not, I find in my tours as a public information officer that a lot of the tax information, a lot of the vital documents get destroyed, whether it be a fire that I had the pleasure of working with for Abby or a flood down here. They don't have their information because they didn't save it. So the very thing that we ask for to get businesses off their feet after a disaster, unfortunately takes time for them to retrieve those records. So to save them in a safe place, whether it be in a safe which is water resistant or cloud or in your CPA's office or somewhere outside of the area, a lot of attention needs to be put in to figure out where to save them and how to access them if you need it the most. Now, we're going to shift gears over to the communication side, which tends to be external. We've spent a little bit of time on the internal side, so then we're going to shift our focus over to the external side. The key in communications is as follows. Make sure that there are folks outside the impacted area. You identify somebody outside the impacted area that serves as your spokesman to make sure that while your business has been impacted, that they share the information through social media or through other forms of communication, that the business is open and functional, and that the outside spokesman can take care of business leads and any other service and needs that might happen. That is critical, number one. Number two, identify folks within the organization that carry out various functionalities in the event of a disaster. Identify that person, identify their scope of work, what they're supposed to do, and make sure you put it into practice. Experts suggest that anywhere from once a year at a bare minimum or every 6 months needs to be the time frame for folks to put this in practice. In other words, if the CEO has job X, the controller has job Y, the assistant controller has job A, and put it in practice so that people have a way of knowing what to do in the unforeseen event that a disaster does strike, and because they tend to strike when we least expect it, hence the word disaster. Keep records of everybody's contact information, phone numbers, addresses, so that the person doing the outreach to make sure that they're accounted for in terms of human assets and other types of assets, that people know how to get hold of you. Because if you can't account for your employees, what's the point? That's the whole idea of being in an employer-friendly environment, to make sure that the very business that you're in, the owners make sure that the employees are taken care of. Janelle, are we on this slide for communications and the communication copy list? Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. There's a slide with the caption, the message center will use phone and email to support crucial post-disaster communications. That message center, depending on how the business works, could very easily be in the disaster area, and they have continued functionality in terms of the power grid, but more importantly, it tends to be on the outside, and they tend to serve as spokesmen not only for the vendors that they do business with, but also for your customers outside the region to make sure that the supply chain continues without any hiccup during the time that the affected area that's gone through the disaster is taking this time to get back on its feet. One of the main things that the communication strategy needs to convey, which is the next slide over, is please make sure that you head off rumors of business failure. More times than not, one of the things that we see actively in the field is businesses don't want to come into our disaster center to borrow money because they're worried that the perception of borrowing money means that they're in trouble. Absolutely not. The communication strategy needs to be, we're open, we're ready for business, and here is another area of the organization that's ready to step up. It needs to be absolutely invisible and seamless to the customer and or to the vendors, that if one part of the organization is down, the other part of the organization picks up where it's dropped off. That's how seamless the actual operations and activities towards business continuity needs to convey. We have lots of additional resources. I don't want to step outside of my time constraints. The additional resources at the very last page is what I'm going to direct your attention to. Janelle, if you would take them to the very last page for additional information. The Small Business Administration not only spends a lot of time doing a twofold mission. One is preparedness through webinars and seminars such as these, and the rest of the time we're spending our time on disaster response. And Abby briefly touched upon our work together, but the declaration process works as follows. If the state doesn't have the resources to garner, to fund the disaster, there are two ways of approaching it. One is the presidential route, where the resources are far greater than the ability of the state to bear it, and or if that gets declined, then they go through the agency route, which is through the Small Business Administration route. And most people on this phone call might be used to hearing about the Small Business Administration through working capital loans, 504 loans, certified hub zones, contracts with the federal government, so on and so forth. But the part that is probably not as prolific in terms of exposure is, for very obvious reasons, we're the Office of Disaster Assistance, and people call on us when there's a disaster. So it's like going to the doctor. Love to see your doc, but you know, in the 15 minutes, thanks for the opportunity to present to you folks, and she and Janelle and thanks for the opportunity to work with you all. Now,
thank you, Sushil. Well, this will be our key. If he's on the line, if you do have a question for me or Sushil, please submit it via that questions chat box. We'll review it and move it to the presenters. We have some questions. I'll start with the first. What are the benefits of preparation?
from my
moving.
Thank you, Abby. Second question, how often should a plan be implemented or a mock run conducted?
Well, I mean, I don't know if Sushil wants to add to this, but you look at your staff. I mean, how much turnover do you have? How often how large is your staff? It's different for each situation. In our office, we have drills twice a year, and they are full-scale drills. We are constantly putting our plans into place. We're going throughout the state to talk to all the locals. I just prepared a drill that is happening in June in Southern California, where we are going to actually deliver pallets of water to local authorities, and they are to prep. How do they get that water of the survivors? All the schools earthquake drills are once a year. We have the great shakeout that happens in October. That could be a time to really just practice your continuity plans, to look at them and sit down with your staff and say, okay, everybody, let's update all this information, let's go through this. So it really depends, in my opinion, but at least annually.
I would, the only thing that I would add to it, Abby nicely said, Plan B really depends on the size of the business. If it's a shop shop, Plan B needs to be implemented on a periodic company more frequency. And Plan B could be something as simple as, today, let's just pick the phone and see if all phone numbers are correct for our employees. People change carriers, people change phones, people take advantage of discounts by vendors, and they forget, oh God, that phone number is no longer good. They changed carriers and we didn't update it. So it could be as simple as reaching out to them and making sure that those numbers are correct. So thanks, Abby.
Thank you. Another question, what is an economic injury disaster loan?
That's the shield.
Indeed. The ability of a business to pay their vendors unimpeded is what this is about. So during the normal course of operations, the business owner is able to make payments to their various vendors, to the current payable, to their rent, and suddenly pay down and make those payments. So the size, the impact of the balance sheet and statement of a business, and then come up with dollars and cents, which are used to address those shortfalls. So it could be used to pay payroll, it could be used to make vendor payments, it could be used to make equipment payments, it could be used to, it cannot be used to pay the shortfall, in other words, to the business owner, but for everything else, on a case-by-case basis, the loan is there to make payments, which your business owner is paying in the past, and make sure that they're made whole.
Yeah, you have to, the concept of economic injury is it's one of those that's hard to wrap around, but once you get it, you'll understand where this loan comes into place. But it's basically what I was mentioning before about economic recovery. After the buildings are rebuilt or people are back to work, things change. The population base is going to change. For example, in Calaveras County, who suffered the fire, many of those people lost their homes. Many of them have not returned to the community. Well, that's your customer base. That's going to drop. Or what about some of your employees? You couldn't rehire them, or they had to leave their job because they didn't have a place to live, or because of tourism. Say you're a tourist-based industry on tourist events. If those are canceled or those are moved, then that's a economic disaster. After all the flashy responding because their base is down.
And the other definition of economic injury that I want to add is a certain level of economic loss. In other words, they put up capital, and that capital is not being eroded as a result of the disaster. I'm sure that through measurement of net charging, the difference between the two is economic injury.
Thank you. We've received several questions requesting the slide presentation to this webinar. We will post a recording of the audio and the visuals of this presentation to our website. For this webinar and the other two that we're going to have this month, we'll notify all registrants by email once those are posted, and we'll probably just post them all at once at the end of the month. So thank you for your interest in having this going forward. Another question, do you have a template for creating a business continuity document?
I didn't hear that, you know.
Do you have a template for creating a business continuity document?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Where can that be accessed?
Ready.gov, American Red Cross has one, FEMA has one, the SBA has one, and in that particular template that I believe was 3 or 4 prior to the end of the presentation, under resources, we have links on our SBA.gov website that you could access them, download them, and put it into action.
Also, the California Seismic Safety Commission has developed a guide for small businesses, and something like that is in that guide as well. Their website is seismic.ca.gov, and although that's earthquake focused, you can really use that for any disaster. Great.
And one other recommendation I'd make, if folks are going to download it and put in Plan B, keep copies of all of your exercises, and once a year when you have your strategic management meet to figure out where the business is headed, and annual forensics on what lessons were learned from the mock run comes in handy. So keep those notes handy, figure out what the forensics were post, and then apply it, and keep improving every day, because the whole idea of business continuity is not just survival, but it's to learn from it, apply best practices, apply what didn't work, and then keep getting better each time.
Thank you. Another question, what?
Let's go to the bottom one. Just what was that last website? So there's 2 that were mentioned, seismic.ca.gov. and that's the California Seismic Safety Commission. And then Sushil mentioned
Ready.gov. And then, of course, our website, the SBA.gov, and then, /resources. And I think one of the slides that we have on the webinar, 3 or 4 down from the bottom, has that particular resource also listed.
Not ready resources. And Janelle has put it up there.
Yeah, I just sent those through the chat feature. So if you're able to open that up, you should see those links.
SBA.gov /services/disaster assistance.
Okay.
Great. Okay, the next question. What's a good strategy to get small businesses in the community to complete all of the steps that have been mentioned, such as getting businesses to write up a continuity plan and distribute contact lists?
That's a very good question, and it's something that we're working on, because there's only so few of us to try to get out to all the small businesses in California, which, as I'm sure you guys are aware, there's quite a lot. One of the things that I have mentioned in the past is working with the local chambers of commerce. I have been working on my side with our local emergency managers. Each county has a business liaison, and it's a growing area. It's not something that's set in stone quite yet. And so I'm trying to move through having the county representatives and the city representatives, the emergency managers, reach out to the local business associations like the Chambers of Commerce or the Main Street associations to try to get this information to them. So that's one of the things that we're doing. But honestly, any suggestions that you have, we're happy to hear them. Feel free to email me or email GO-Biz, because you are the community, and if you can think of a way that we could better serve you, we're happy to do that.
And the only thing I'd add to what Abby suggested would be to put those things in place. I would reach out to your supply chain as a business owner. And within the supply chain, we can only take care of one corner of our world, one person at a time. So my recommendation to your business owner might be for you folks to implement that in your community. Start off with your supply chain. Start off with the folks that are in your line of work. If you're a distributor, reach out to another competitor and say, guess what? We're coming up with a business continuity plan. What are your ideas? Work together. And the more businesses work together, not only competitively, but in the world of a disaster, you'll find that sales will flow invariably because people want to do business with people who tend to cooperate and who tend to be congenial to each other. So my suggestion would be, again, without being repetitive, start off with your folks in the same industry, start off with the folks in your supply chain.
Then there's a question up there about suggestions for drills for evacuation. It really depends on what the disasters you face. I mean, if fires are your disasters, then our CAL FIRE has many suggestions. If floods are your disaster, we have floodsmart.gov that has different suggestions on drills and for evacuations. And then also seismic. There we have a lot of information on seismic. The Seismic Safety Commission, also the Earthquake Country Alliance. We do drills with them constantly, and in that document from the Seismic Safety Commission we'll have all of this information.
Thank you, Abby. Sushil, could you repeat that one website that you mentioned through the SBA? It wasn't sba.gov/ready. It was a different extension.
The website that I mentioned is, I think, the third last slide, and there's a web link there. Did you guys see it?
Yeah. /disaster. SBA.gov/disaster. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Are there any other questions? Feel free at this time to submit another question if you have one.
And this is Abby. Like I said, feel free to email me directly. My contact information is in the PowerPoint that will be posted. And I'm happy to answer questions or talk to you on the phone if there's anything specific. And I can point you in the right direction if I don't have the answer.
And Janelle, I don't have my contact information listed directly, so feel free to offer my email, sushil.kumar@sba.gov, and also my phone number, 916-878-1495.
Sure, I'll include those in the final slides.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you for your time. I think that, I'm just checking to see if we have any other questions. I think that's it from the attendees. Okay.
All right. Well, this is Jesse Torres, again, your State Small Business Advocate. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Sushil, for your presentation. Thank you, all of you who are on the webinar, for joining us today. As Janelle mentioned, the slides and the audio of the presentation will be posted to the GO-Biz website. And maybe what we can do is find a way to put up some of those links along with that. Because I know that, I helped pay for that Seismic Commission source guide, and there's a lot of great information there, worksheets to help you walk through some of the steps in preparing your business and checklists and that kind of thing. So it'd be good for you all to have that link. And as someone who actually lived through the Northridge earthquake, as a high school teenager, all this is especially poignant to me. So I appreciate our presenters today speaking on this very timely issue. We'll notify all the registrants by email once everything has been posted, and you know, we please encourage you to join us for upcoming webinars May 12th and May 19th to learn more about our export assistance programs, how to GO-Biz, and California Small Business Loan Guarantee Program. If you'd like the time, you can visit us at business.ca.gov. But thank you for your time again.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, Bobby, and thank you, Janelle. Have a good afternoon.